Hi, not board gamers, and welcome back to Not Board Gaming. I'm your host, I'm Mark. Now in today's video we're going to be taking a quick look at the new expansion to Hamlet. Of course, Hamlet came out from Mighty Boards last year, designed by David Cherkop, the guy behind obviously Petrichor, and they have a new expansion which is called Hamlet by the Lake. Now, Hamlet, the base game, I previewed it last year for the Kickstarter. It was very, very successful. And it's one of the most charming games I've ever played. And you know, it almost, if you looked at the word charming in the dictionary for a definition of the word charming, it would probably say, you know, play Hamlet, the board game. It's utterly just a beautiful, relaxing game about taking your village, trying to build a church, and when that church is built, your village becomes what's called a hamlet, and that is how it is. And this kind of resource management and not quite pick up and deliver, but you're transporting goods from one part to another, so you can build buildings and you can collect materials and you can refine those materials to get better materials and get better points, etc. And in the base game, the kind of end game trigger is when all the constituent parts of the church are built. That triggers the end game. Everybody has another round, and then that's it. You do your final scoring, etc. And you know, it's a 1 to 4 player game that is just kind of easy to get into, easy to explain, easy to play, and it just has a great time. You probably play it in around about 90 minutes for a solo game. And in a solo game, you're going to play it against an AI called Botrick, and they're going to choose some actions depending on what tokens they pull out, and where the tokens are, what action tokens they pull out, and where their kind of their tokens that tell you what action they're going to take are on their particular board. If you want to see kind of how it plays, then go and check out my preview video from about 18 months ago where I went through the base game. But we're here to talk about the expansion, which is Hamlet by the Lake. And again, it's a charming way to add more gameplay and more variability, should I say, into the game that still maintains that really good core Hamlet feel. So, what is Hamlet by the Lake? Right, so in Hamlet, when you build out your tiles and you put it in, you generally had some gaps in there because the tiles are all kind of different shapes. Here you can see some of the shapes here, and they tessellate, but depending on how you put them and and where you put them, you would have gaps in your map. And every time you play the game, the map is wildly different depending on where you place those. So what David and the team at Mighty Boards have done is come up with an idea to actually fill those gaps. And how are they going to fill them? Well, they're going to fill them by putting water tiles in there, some lake tiles in there. And there are 2 types of lake tiles, and I don't think they're going to show up too well on the camera. The first one is your kind of standard lake tile, and the second one is a deep water lake tile. Now, you have to, when these gaps are formed, any gaps, any of those gaps that are adjacent to an existing building tile has a standard water tile put on there, and then you're going to put a fish token on there. But if they're not, any of the gaps aren't adjacent to a building tile, then you're going to put a deep water token. There's no fish tokens go on there, but you fish in a slightly different way. And then what you can do is you can fish these tiles in the game. You can fish them, you can get fish, and then you can either sell them for resources or use them for abilities. And there are a number of season cards, and I'll explain that in a second. There are also boats that come on that are here as well. Now, bear in mind, you know, although the base game is the final copy, the expansion is all prototype material. We can see some little wooden boats that you're going to put your flag on, and you can put them on the lakes, and they act pretty much like the donkeys do in the main game, in the fact that they will help you transport your goods across tiles. So that's really good, but you can only use obviously your own your own boats. And how do you identify them? Well, you're going to put a flag on those boats. So as you know, in the game you get a number of flags that you put on landmarks, etc. You can put them on the boats and identify that as your particular lake, if you like. So nobody else can have a boat on there. Nobody else can use that particular boat. And you know, it kind of just feels like a natural progression of Hamlet. I think it's a really smart thing that they've done. So what I'll do, I'm not really going to play through the game because, you know, Hamlet is, I've done a preview video on that. There's plenty of gameplay videos out there on Hamlet, but I'm going to show you the table, show you kind of some of the new stuff and how it works, and then we'll just talk about it after I finish doing that. So yeah, let's head to the table and I'll show you a little bit of Hamlet by the Lake coming to you from Mighty Boards, already on Kickstarter, already funded. Some 5,000 people have already backed this already, and designed by David Chirkop. Okay, so you can see I'm kind of part way through a game here, but I want to go through the new components that you get first of all. So first of all, down here you can see some cards. There are 2 cards for each type of fish. They go from rare to not so rare to common. So red is rare, blue is kind of in the middle, and the green is a common fish. And if you just take the kind of rare and not so rare ones here, the red and the blue ones, there are 2 cards for each season for them. So you got, I've got spring cards here. Basically, I picked one of the spring cards for each one of them, and they give you different kind of abilities on there. And there's also a common fish tile for the green tokens that come out of the fish tokens that come out of the bag or the bowl or whatever you're using, and that's standard throughout the entire game. So you've got those cards there, but you can see we've got a few other cards here as well that you can choose from, and it adds that level of variability on there. So I'll explain the fish in a second as well. We also have these water tiles here, and you can see there are, I don't know if it'll show up too well on my camera, there are 2 types here. Bear in mind these are prototypes. These here are the standard fishing ones, and these here are the deep water fishing ones, and you place those depending on whether they're adjacent to a building where the lake is being formed or not. If they are touching a building, if it's adjacent to a building, you're going to press one of these kind of standard water tiles. If they're not adjacent to a building tile in any way, shape or form, you place a deep water tile, but I'll show you how that works in a wee while also. There are also some new building type cards as well. So we have a storeroom card. Don't negate the storeroom card, that's really important. We have a beach tile. We have a dockyard. We have a cliffside, and we also have an aquarium, so it comes with a wealth of new tiles also. The other thing it comes with is these fish tokens. So when you go fishing, you're going to randomly draw fish tokens out of a bag or a bowl. I'm using a bowl here, and as I mentioned down here, that's the kind of token that you pull out. Depends on what you can do with it. You can either kind of sell it straight away to get gold, etc., or you can use it to craft something on these menu tiles here. And those menu tiles are really, really good because they allow you to get some abilities potentially from there. We can see some little fish tokens here as well, and these are the fish tokens that you're going to place onto the board when you form a lake. You're going to place them on the ones that are, there we go, the standard water ones. You're not going to place them on the deep water tiles. And there's also an additional fish token that should be here for Botrick as well, which is a solo player. There's the solo AI for it. One didn't come in the prototype, so I'm just using a standard fish token there for that. And the final things is these little boats. As I mentioned, you're going to place boats, or you have the ability to place boats on a lake. They're going to act as kind of safeguarding that lake for you, but that boat is yours, but it's also a place where you're going to place your flags. You see, in the original game, the end game trigger was building the church. There is an additional end game trigger in Hamlet by the Lake, where is if you place your last flag token, and that's one of these things here. Here we go. 1 second. If you place your last flag token, that will also trigger the end of the game. And I think that gets around the fact that multiple players, the game could go on a little bit longer. So what happens then? Well, as you know, Hamlet is a game about kind of connections, if you like, yeah? Ensuring that you have the ability to get resources from where they're produced back to where you need to use them. And that's where your donkeys are going to become really, really, really important. You do not negate the kind of the usefulness of your donkeys. They help you transport your goods. Boats are going to do a very similar thing here. So the kind of key change in Hamlet, or the major change in Hamlet by the Lake, is the ability to form lakes. So as I mentioned, throughout the normal game of Hamlet, invariably your map would have little kind of gaps in it. So if I was to place that tile there in a normal game, that gap would just stay forever. Well, as soon as you create a gap in the lake, a gap in the board, you're going to form a lake instantly. And that lake will form absolutely instantly. So, and this then dictates exactly what you put on there. So if you look at this, if I was to put this here, for example, okay, that is now closing that up. So as soon as you get a closed space on there, totally enclosed, and it could be corner to corner, or it could just be totally enclosed by segments like that. You're going to fill it with tiles. And how do you do that? Well, you're going to put these tiles in here. Now, bearing in mind this prototype, sometimes these tiles don't fit quite correctly into there. It might push it out a little bit. So as I mentioned, if there's a segment that's adjacent to a building, you're going to put these standard water tiles. And we can see that we've got the, is it the town hall there? Yeah, yeah, the town hall there. So we've got two buildings there. We've also got the church up there, so that's an adjacent one as well. So they're going to have the standard ones on there. They're going to have the standard water lakes on there. But down here, we've got the deep water fishing lakes, okay? So, yeah, deep water. And you can see the darker tiles go on there. So that's how a lake is formed. As soon as a gap happens, that lake is formed. Now, if you form that lake, you're going to score 1 victory point for every 2 tiles on there rounded down. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That would score me, obviously, 3 victory points for that. But if there was 5 there, that would score me 2 victory points. Then what we're going to do on the standard water tiles is we're going to place a fish token on there. We're not going to place one on here, and I'll come back to that in a second. They're the deep water tokens, and I'll explain what happens there in a second. So the fish are now placed on there. So how do I then get those fish? Well, I get to place one of my workers, and let's use a red one so you can see it nice and easily, and place it on that building. And as an action, I can now fish on that lake, and I can fish on any adjacent tile. So let's have a look at this here. So I'm on the town hall here. This tile and this tile are adjacent. So I would remove those fish tokens, and I would draw 2 fish out of this bag, out of this bowl. So let's see, what are we going to get? We've got that one and that one. We've got a common and a not so common. You're allowed to have at the end of your turn a maximum of 3 of these tiles. So that's cool. And that means that I can now, according to this, with a blue or a green, what I could do is get rid of the green one and gain 2 gold. There we go. Or I could get rid of the blue one, gain 1 gold, or if I have 2 or more donkeys, I gain another donkey for free without using a worker. So that's really good. That means I don't have to actually buy a donkey, which, you know, kind of costs you 3 gold or 3 coins anyway. So you can, as I say, you can get rid of them and just take the gold for them, or you can absolutely start to use them for those abilities, and then you would put them back. To, you know, these fish tiles don't go back onto here either, okay? So once they're fished, but that still leaves anybody that goes on the church tile there can do a fishing action for that and try and get that, basically. So we'll put those back in there. Now, if you form a lake with deep water in there, what you can do, you don't have to do that, is you can put a boat with one of your flags on there. Okay, flags are a finite resource now. Remember, well, they've always been a finite resource, but remember they now, excuse me, they now are an end-game trigger. So put that on there, and I would get to, what I would get to do is I would get to choose, for that deep water tile, I would get to choose 3 tiles out of here. And you don't have to fish for it, there's not an action. So as soon as that's formed, if I wanted to use that flag, I would pull 3 tiles out of here. So 1, 2, you can't see on camera, but I'm actually looking away from the bowl. I know you can't see me. There we go. And what have we got? Oh, look at that. We've got a rare fish and 2 blue fish. And that is what you would do if you do that. Now that is yours. You cannot, nobody else can put a boat on there. Nobody else can use that boat. You can't move that boat. Once that's out, that's out. But as I say, that boat pretty much acts like a donkey as well, in the fact that it helps you transport goods to it, but also it means that your workers can use that boat to move the tiles at the other side as well. So that's kind of how the fishing action works and how those tile actions work. And it's a really, as you can see, it's a really nice, feels like an integral mechanism, if you like. And if you look at the board, I've got another couple of lakes that have formed up here, and it just feels like this natural progression of exactly what Hamlet can do. Now, of course, Botterick has got his own way of doing things. So what's going to happen with Botterick, you know, if he takes a fishing action, he's going to put his, well, there's a little bit of a decision tree, if you like, but in reality, what he's going to try and do is put one of his workers in a place where he can get the most fish. So if that had been there, my boat's not there, if that had been there, and Botterick, and we drew a green token out of here, and Botterick was therefore going to do a fishing action, what Botterick would do here is he would look for the place where he could place his worker and get the most fish. Well, that is exactly where I put mine, because there's 2 there, so he would fish those. Then at the end of his turn, if he's got 3 tiles or more, more than 3 fish tiles, he would discard down to 3, and he'd do that in least rare order. So let's just put these this way. Okay, so he would go from green to blue to red, basically. And when he sells those fish tiles, so say he's got his 3 fish tiles, or his fish from there, he's got, let's take one of each, okay? So we've got a green, a blue, and a red. The green one, he would put a gold coin onto his favour tile, even if it's on its X side. The blue one, he would gain 1 coin onto the favour tile and gain 1 victory point as well. And then the red one, he would gain 2 victory points, and he would do that so if they have more than 3 fish tiles, they immediately discard superfluous fish tiles in the least rare order and gain the benefits from that. So that's really good. Now, there is some minor changes in how Botterick kind of constructs buildings as well on part of the decision tree. What would happen is he would place it next to a tile as far along the road network with none of your roads on it, where they can form a lake to place the most lake tiles. So that's kind of the key thing there, is they're looking at building lakes, they're looking at getting the points from building those lakes. And if they can't do that, they move on to that next one, which is next to a tile as close to the church as possible, where they can form a lake to place the most lake tiles. So he's always going to try and place a tile that will let them form a lake with most lake tiles possible, because of course how these tiles work is they can move around a little bit and you can put them in slightly different positions. He's going to try and they are going to try and maximize those lake tiles as well. So of course there are some rules for kind of how they put their boats on there as well. For placing their boats, it says, after creating any lakes, Botterick decides whether to place a boat in one of the just formed lakes. They will choose to place a boat if they have any flags left and if any of the following are true. So if the first lake milestone, so it would have its own milestone. Again, one didn't come with my prototype copy. It's not the end of the world. If the first lake milestone is still unclaimed, then they will place a boat. If they've just formed a lake adjacent to a refinery tile that they don't currently have access to via a road or one of their boats. So of course, you can put tiles on the board that means that you can't quite get access to them at some point. So this would allow them access, because you can put a boat on there, and as I say, that allows them to transport the goods from there. A lake they just formed that contains deep water, so they're going to go for those fishing tiles. That's what they're going to do. Remember, if there's deep water lake and you put a boat on there, you instantly draw 3 tiles out of the bag and it's not an action. And also, they would put a boat on there. If putting a boat on, because you have to put a flag on a boat, means that they can trigger the end of the game. So remember, the game now ends in 2 ways. You either build a church or one player uses all their flags. And that's how seamlessly it all kind of integrates and fits into Hamlet, the village building game. So that is Hamlet by the Lake. Really brief overview, because, you know, plenty of videos out there about Hamlet and how to play it. I've got my own video out there which previewed it. It's a wonderful, charming game, and Hamlet by the Lake feels like a really first-rate addition that seamlessly drops into this, and it seamlessly drops into the solo mode also. There we go. And you can see it's not a difficult concept to grasp. It feels like a really nice little bit to add into Hamlet that adds a lot of variability, and you've got that new kind of end game trigger as well, which I think will please people that certainly play. You know, if you're playing with 4 players, I think the game can potentially go long. If you're playing solo, not so much, but still having that additional timer on there of getting all the flags, or the last person, either you or Botterick, to use your flags, is really, really good, and I think it adds just an additional pressure into Hamlet. I like the variability in the cards that they've got as well, in terms of, you know, whether you choose a spring or summer or autumn or winter card set for how the fish are, and the placing of tiles becomes even more strategic now, because you're thinking, right, okay, if I can make a lake there, then potentially what I can do is I can not only score points from putting that lake out there, but I know there's some deep water there, so I can get additional fish tokens, and I know there's some fishing there, so I can maybe potentially capitalize on that fishing on my next turn, and it becomes really important. It adds that element of kind of further depth to how you play Hamlet. The spatial puzzle becomes more and more important for it. Now, the solo mode with Botrick works seamlessly in the first game, in the base game, and with this, the new fish mechanism or fishing mechanism works really simply as well. Now, you know, if you played with Botrick, you know that it follows the same basic principles as a player, but he doesn't quite work the same as a player. He doesn't use donkeys. He moves around a little bit differently and doesn't use donkeys. He calls in favors, if you like, and his recruiting can be quite, in the early part of the game, his recruiting process, it can be quite aggressive, basically, as he's building up coins on the favor tile. But fear not, if you're a solo gamer, it's not just manageable, it's more than manageable. I won't play Hamlet now without incorporating Hamlet by the Lake, because for me it takes an already brilliant game and gives it that more rounded feel, and I think that's really, really good. The additional tiles are really good as well. You're going to mix them into the other tiles that you've got. But there's a couple of starting tiles, and then some of the other types of tile going there as well. So you're going to mix them in. They're going to go into the big bag, of course, and you're going to start drawing them out as well. And again, just a different way of looking at things and a different way of thinking of things. Now, I do know that if you haven't got Hamlet, then or if you're returning back for Hamlet by the Lake, and you've already got the original Hamlet in the first Kickstarter, there's some quality of game improvements that are happening for it. And what I mean by that is, I don't like using quality of life, but one of the kind of bits of feedback, development feedback they got for Hamlet, was that some of the text was a little bit small on the cards, and you know, once you're laying all these tiles out, you have to stretch across the board to find out exactly what's on there. So it improved the kind of graphic design on those tiles. So if you're a returning backer and you're backing Hamlet by the Lake, you can get, you'll get a new set of fully new set of the tiles that are there for it as well. And of course, if you got the first kind of run, I got the Founders Edition here, if you got the first run, it had the cardboard church in there, and the cardboard church it wasn't the best, and I think, you know, it either people had problems with it kind of standing up or just starting to kind of fall apart after repeated use. Well, fear not, because in the new Kickstarter you can get a wooden church for it as well, which gives you that more thing. You don't need the church, of course you don't, because you have the tiles that you can place on there when you start building part of the church. But yeah, so there are some quality of play improvements that are happening there, which I think is really good from Mighty Boards. They've listened to the feedback that said, yeah, this is what people weren't so sure about. Let's change that a little bit. So going back to Hamlet by the Lake, as I say, I will not play Hamlet now without using the By the Lake expansion. For me, it really just kind of does exactly what an expansion like this should do. It adds an element of game-changing conditions or game-changing items, if you like, but without giving you massive rules overhead. You're not struggling to learn new rules. So if you know already how to play Hamlet, then by all means drop Hamlet by the Lake straight in. And even as a new player, if you're getting Hamlet this time around and you're getting the By the Lake expansion, maybe you want to play a game without the By the Lake, I don't know, but I think you really could, because the rules overhead isn't massive. You could absolutely drop it in from your first game and have no real problem playing it. It takes one of the most charming games that I've played and makes it even more charming. You get the feeling of a kind of an English village in kind of whenever it was. I don't know what period it's set in. It's certainly not set in the modern day era, with the sun shining through wheat fields, etc. You can almost smell the sunshine and the heat as you're trying to build your village. It just evokes, the whole gameplay evokes the feeling of the era and the place where it's set. This sunny English countryside in a small village, and you're taking that village, trying to build a church so your village can become a hamlet. It's an utterly adorable game. By the Lake adds some really nice mechanisms into it. I wouldn't play the game without it, and if it's of interest to you, then you need to check out the Kickstarter. It's live. It's got about 7 or 8 days left to go. It's already massively funded. The link is certainly in the description below. Yeah, I absolutely love Hamlet by the Lake. So thank you very much for joining me on this video. It's a really pretty brief video through kind of how Hamlet by the Lake works. As I say, I wasn't going to go into the full run of how Hamlet works. Just wanted to give you a brief overview on how Hamlet by the Lake works and how much I enjoy it. So thank you very much for watching. My name's Mark. This is Not Board Gaming. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Check out our other videos. And one final thought: if you can't find anyone else to play with, there's nothing wrong with playing with yourselves. Until next time.